It started as a gruesome discovery on the water, a human body part floating in a lake marked by distinctive tattoos. Then, this case took an even more gruesome twist, and now 2 family members of a victim are in custody. There are a lot of questions about what allegedly happened inside a home hours away from where a floating arm was discovered. We're on the case presented by Law&Crime. I'm Chris Stewart. Picture this, and it's summertime, right? Everybody's trying to enjoy themselves outside, and if you have a boat, a great time to be out on the water in so many parts of the country. So imagine you're out on the water with your family, trying to have a carefree day, when you notice something floating nearby. So in this situation, a dad hands his daughter an oar and says, hey, as we get closer, it looks like there's a dead fish off in the distance. Can you just push it away from our boat? So as you're holding this oar, you get closer and you realize what is floating right in front of you is not a dead fish. And the reality is far scarier than that. That is a story that a woman says happened to her when she was out with her family on their boat on June 28th. And this is a picture, per the Illinois State Police, of what that woman saw. A tattoo of a Green Bay Packers helmet with a skull. And when she reportedly saw this, she knew what she was looking at was not a dead fish, and what she was looking at once belonged to a human. We just learned some shocking new information in this story about what allegedly happened to the victim, but also what 2 people now facing charges in connection to this case, what they have told investigators, and what they had to say is nothing allegedly short of disturbing. So we'll get to that in just a moment. But before we do, let's get up to speed on where this case began. This is where the discovery was made on June 28th, Lake Mattoon. It's in central Illinois. We're talking roughly a 3-hour drive south of Chicago. And what she was looking at in the water specifically, according to police, was a human arm. And once she got to shore, she called 911 and the search for answers began. Police in Illinois say they were trying to figure out what else might be in the water, where the arm came from, and who the arm belonged to. And it took police a couple of days to figure that out. So they released a picture of the tattoos to the public in hopes, because they are pretty unique, that someone would know who they belonged to. And days later, they identified the victim as a 38-year-old man named Dalewayne Turner. And he lives hours away from this lake in Plainfield, Illinois. Here's a picture of Dalewayne that we found online on his Facebook profile picture with his wife, Robin. Now, what we know about Turner, not only was he married to Robin, he was a huge fan of the Chicago Bears, and his family writes on a GoFundMe page that they have launched to try and raise money for funeral expenses that, quote, his sense of humor and kindness made him a beloved friend to many, and he always went out of his way to help others. Police say those tattoos, they're obviously pretty unique. They helped identify Turner and allow police to quickly begin an investigation to try and figure out what happened and how his arm ended up in Lake Mattoon. Turner lived in this home in Plainfield, Illinois, right near Joliet, and there are images online of police investigating here shortly after it was announced that Dalewayne Turner's arm was found in the water of Lake Mattoon. Now, Dalewayne's arm was found on June 28th. That date is really important. It was a Sunday. Police announced him as the victim in this case on Wednesday, a couple days later, on July 1st. But this is really interesting. Look at his Facebook page. It appears he updated his profile picture on June 30th, 2 days after his arm was found in the lake. Now, it's unclear who could have been the person who had access to his Facebook page and could update his profile picture twice after the date that police say Dalewayne's arm was found in Lake Mattoon. A background check on the address where police were investigating where they say Dalewayne Turner lived showed that his wife, Robin, was also a resident of that home. Here's a picture of Robin and Dalewayne together. Looks like they're on a trip to San Francisco, visiting Alcatraz back in 2023. Now, Robin is a bit older than Turner. She is 62 years old. In 2022, Turner posted, quote, "Happy 12-year anniversary to the love of my life, Robin Monroe Turner. I love you so much, baby. Here is to many more to come." Now, it is unclear if the Turners were still married at the time of Dalewayne's death. But I want to show you this. Here is Robin Turner's mugshot. Police have taken her into custody in connection to whatever happened to Dalewayne Turner, and there are still a lot of questions about that at this point. And she is not the only person facing charges in this case. Here is a mugshot of the other person who has been arrested in connection to Dalewayne Turner's arm being found in Lake Mattoon. This is James Adams. He is 26 years old, and he is rumored to also be a family member of Dalewayne Turner's. In 2022, Dalewayne wrote on Facebook, quote, "Happy 22nd birthday to my little brother, James Adams. We love you and are so proud of how far you have come from growing from a boy and into a man. Mom would be so proud of you, and I know she is smiling down on you from heaven today. Happy birthday, little brother." Now, Robin Turner and James Adams are charged with concealing a homicide and dismembering a human body. The big question, though, at this point is what happened to Turner and how did his arm end up in a lake roughly 3 hours south of where Dalewayne Turner lived? Sunday night, the Will County, Illinois coroner announced that they believe Turner was the victim of an apparent homicide, and they also say that he was pronounced dead at 9:17 p.m. on Wednesday at his home in Plainfield, Illinois. And they also say that, quote, his appendages, plural, were found in Lake Mattoon, meaning that more than one body part had been recovered in that lake. Now, as far as the official cause of death of Turner, that has yet to be determined. Now, the date of Turner's death being July 1st, that is after his arm was found on the 28th, that does appear to line up when police arrived at his home in Plainfield to seemingly execute a search warrant and turn their investigation here. It is unclear when police believe that Dalewayne Turner was allegedly killed. Now, at the time of this recording, murder charges have not been filed in this case. So let's get to this new information that court documents are reportedly unveiling in this case, and this is major. According to the Herald News, inside a freezer in that Plainfield, Illinois home, police say they found Turner's head, his neck, and his torso. This freezer was allegedly duct taped shut, had a blanket over it, and even there were cinder blocks on top of the freezer that carried these alleged dismembered body parts. Now, police say under the freezer, there was a saw blade with what looked like blood on it, according to the newspaper. Now, police say Adams, that is Dalewayne Turner's own half-brother, allegedly admitted to people that he killed Turner by stabbing him to death. Now, Robin Turner, that is Turner's wife, she allegedly helped try to cover up the crime, according to police. Police say that freezer that carried the dismembered body parts that was covered up with the duct tape and the blankets, they believe the freezer was specifically purchased allegedly for covering up this crime. Now, Adams allegedly told investigators that he was not going to talk, but then prosecutors say unprompted, after he was read his Miranda rights, he said, quote, "The one thing I will say is that I did it out of self-defense. I will tell you guys that," end quote. Now, Robin Turner allegedly said that Dalewayne and Adams ended up getting into a fight and Adams stabbed his brother multiple times. She then allegedly points the finger at Adams, saying that he was the one who told her to help try to cover up this crime. Joining us now from Illinois to talk about this case, retired detective commander with the Chicago Police Department, Will Svilar, also one of the hosts of Big City Crime Inside the Red Tape, which you can find here on YouTube. Will Svilar, always great to have you here on Law and Crime. You know, the idea that someone's out for a weekend on Lake Mattoon and then suddenly you see this Packers helmet and you realize it's not a dead fish. From an investigator's standpoint, the arm, which is just so morbid to talk about, rising to the surface, still having the tattoo on it. What does that tell you?
Well, it tells me a couple of things. One, somebody put it there. That's one thing. The guy didn't get separated from his arm, by happenstance. But then you wonder, is it a boat accident? Is it something like that? And the fact that you could still see that tattoo really well, and from what I saw in the pictures that I saw, the skin looked like it was in pretty good condition, tells me it hadn't been there very long.
Yeah, and I think too, like the coroner saying that appendages, plural, was found. And I know that they were out at the lake, the state police, I believe it was the Cumberland County Sheriff's Office, looking through this lake for a while. And they were able to find, according to the medical examiner, appendages, plural. And they did say an autopsy was done. Another morbid question, like how much of a body do you need to actually perform an autopsy?
Well, what you need is when you're performing an autopsy, you're trying to figure out what happened. You're trying to find out cause and manner of death. So, a couple of arms, appendages, legs, feet, it may not tell the whole story. It's been my experience that the head and the torso tell the whole story. Now, if you have, obviously, if you recovered a head or, again, not to be morbid, or a torso, and you see an obvious gunshot wound, or an obvious stab wound, now you can make a determination of cause and manner. But if you don't have that, it's kind of difficult to say what killed this person.
Yeah, and they end up following the trace because, to an extent, I mean, the fact that he had this, he's a Bears fan, but it's like a Packers helmet in with like a skull. The fact that, that was on there really was something unique that law enforcement could then put out to the public, and someone along the way, maybe a family member or friend, said, hey, I know who that is. And then they go to a house in Plainfield, Illinois, and they apparently have been able to find more evidence in there that leads to the arrest of these two people. But before we get to that part of the investigation, I guess you see in movies, people dump bodies into bodies of water or parts of bodies. How sophisticated of a criminal potentially are we talking about here if what's alleged is true, that the fact that you had a body part that actually came to the surface of this lake to the point where, these boaters were able to see it and just push it out of the way?
Well, so again, not to be too graphic or too morbid, the body's going to come up unless the body's properly prepared. When I mean that, I mean, if you wrap in a tarp and then you weigh it down, then perhaps it's going to stay down. But if you just throw anything in a garbage bag, say you throw the arm in a garbage bag or legs in a garbage bag, the animals are going to get to that, or the fish are going to get to that. They're going to start ripping it open, and then it's going to come up. So we're not talking about a master class of criminal here.
No. And it seems like, I mean, they pretty quickly made arrests once the body part was found. If it didn't have the tattoo, I mean, how would you have figured out that this was Dalewayne Turner?
Fingerprints. If you had an arm, you might be able to get the prints, depending how long the body was in the water. But I've seen prints brought back they add water to it to bring the prints back. Fingerprints could do it. Then you got to, if that doesn't work, you got to search the missing persons files. You can get marrow and try to do DNA. So there's ways to identify it. But especially arrests, like when we make an arrest and we process somebody and do their fingerprints, we photograph their tattoos too, and that becomes part of a searchable thing that you can identify somebody with. You can search for tattoos, Green Bay Packers skull. If he's arrested and it was photographed, it'll pop up.
And the other part too, just looking at the two people at this point who have been charged, and as we're recording this, both of them, Robin Turner, who we believe was or still was at the time of his death, the wife of Dalewayne Turner, and then someone who appears to be his brother, James, also has been charged, but they're not charged with murder at this point. At the time we're recording this, they're due in court today in Will County, Illinois. They have concealing a body charge. That's what they're facing right now. And after homicide charge they're facing right now. Like, what would you need to actually charge homicide in this case?
So the interesting thing about the charge that I read was concealment of a homicidal death.
Yes, that was it specifically.
So concealment of a homicidal death is suggestive that this was a murder. I shouldn't say that. Suggested that it was a homicide. Now, homicide murder is a different thing. Homicide just means, death of another caused at the hand of another. Death of one caused by the hand of another. Murder is typically a charge. But I can only speculate that when they went into that house, the evidence was bountiful. Because they were quick to say, we know who it is. We don't need more tips. I have to believe that there was some evidence suggested that this guy met his end at the hand of another. So that's, I think, where they got that charge. But you're not going to get a murder charge until you get a cause and manner of death from the ME.
It's very rare, I feel like, to have gruesome cases like this. Not saying they don't happen, but for it to be random and the person wasn't known to this particular individual. In this case, you have someone who appears to be the wife and someone who appears to be the brother of the victim. I guess when this investigation begins and you realize who this person is, how do you go about interacting with someone like Robin Turner, knowing that, maybe they were still in a relationship at the time? Doesn't appear that they had posted, images on social media for what it's worth at that point. How do you go about that part of the investigation and kind of zeroing in on her, it seems, as opposed to maybe looking elsewhere?
it goes down to just basic interview techniques. When you find somebody, now you know who this person is. And again, I don't know how they identified this person. I know it was through a tattoo, but I don't know if another family member called in and said, that's my brother or whatever, or another relative. But you're going to go out there and you're going to notify next of kin. And when you go to notify next of kin, you're going to get a feel off of that. And that interview is going to take, a different, if you start to suspect somebody, then your interview techniques are going to change. And obviously you have to, if you're going to be adversarial, you have to advise them of their rights. But it's just basic knocking on the door and say, hey, listen, do you know where your husband is? And then you start getting a feel from that. And then it goes from there. And then I'm sure they did a search warrant on the house. And again, like I believe that there was plentiful evidence to support that concealment of a homicide and also dismembering of a body. I think they were also charged with.
And on kind of the theme of just an incredibly morbid case, it appears that inside of this home in Plainfield is where they found a lot of this evidence. How difficult is it to, in a case where someone's being dismembered, to actually cover that up? Like, what are you looking for when you go into the home that tells you that this is where this crime potentially happened?
Well, quite obviously, you're looking for blood. And no matter how you try to mop up blood, and it's been my limited experience in dismemberment cases where they usually try to do it in a bathtub, but blood gets everywhere. And also you need tools, and it's awful hard to clean those tools. So when you go in there, you're looking for blood, obviously. And this could be getting into the P traps to see if there's blood in the P traps underneath the baseboard. Even if you mop, it can get splashed under the baseboard, and you can find blood under baseboards when people are trying to clean up. Towels. Again, like I said, tools. There could be tissue on the tools. So you're doing a full search of that house, and you're taking your time and you're recovering everything that would suggest that was used to, dismember this person.
Yeah, and it's shocking when you see the pictures that Dalewayne Turner had with Robin Turner, and then even like wishing his younger brother a happy birthday. What happened over the last couple of years to allegedly get to this point? Again, they haven't been charged with homicide as of yet. But I also think of this lake where they were at, pretty popular summertime spot in central Illinois for people to go out. It opens the door where it's like cameras, that may be in that area around the time. I mean, you're looking into that. Now, this house seems to be in a nice suburban neighborhood. How do you go about tracking the connection between this home where there was a lot of evidence found and where these two were allegedly arrested, and then all the way down to Lake Mattoon where these body parts were found?
Many techniques you can use. You can use their cell phones. You can try to track their movement by cell phone. We talked about this on the show the other day, this geofencing stuff.
Yeah.
Where, you can use Google to try to track their locations. But, Supreme Court said you're going to have to be a little bit more careful on that, a little bit more specific. But you do still have that tool. Cameras, like you said, there's cameras everywhere. We know this. If there's a boat dock there's a camera on the boat dock, I assure you. So stuff like that. And again, you don't know what these people said. They also may have made statements implicating each other, or, one or the other or both. So you're working with all that stuff, but tracking their movements is, you have your phones, your cameras are the two biggest tools that we use.
How often does a case where someone's charged with something like concealment of a body and dismemberment not end up being charged with that homicide? Like, what's the process of this?
We have to wait for the ME. And again, you have to have a cause and manner of death, or you got to be able to argue that if you can't find a cause and manner of death, that it could only have been a murder. But we don't, you don't know. They may say it's pending toxicology, so maybe it's an overdose, and they panicked and they decided they had to get rid of the body because it was an OD. I've seen that on more than one occasion. But you need that cause and manner from the ME, or pretty good, an excellent circumstantial case to get a murder charge without a cause and manner. It's going to be almost impossible.
But even on a concealment, like, what type of prison time, if these are all the charges that they're facing, and I know they're doing court kind of as we're recording right now and waiting for information to come out of that, but like, how serious of like prison time are they looking at right now if these are the only charges that they're facing?
Well, it's not a class X. Concealment of a homicide, it's a felony, but it's a felony that's probably probationable.
Like, even like a dismemberment type situation?
How you conceal it is how you conceal it. I mean, I think you had the charge of dismemberment because I think it's an added on charge, and it's a little higher felony, but you really want the class X murder. So you're going to really need to work on that. It's not a ton of time, and depending on their backgrounds, it could actually be probationable.
Wow. And then I think too of just um, the fact that like you just see like, I mean, how often for you do you see these cases where it's like you discover a body and then it is the family member? And I'm not saying that that's what's happened here. Of course, everything's alleged at this point, and they're presumed innocent till guilty. But like, what do you make of when you see people who were so seemingly in love for a period of time, and then here we are just a couple of years later, where they're mugshots and they're being talked about on true crime shows for something as horrific as even just dismembering a body? We don't know how he died, but the idea that, to cut up another human being as they have been alleged to have done, and then dump a body in the middle of a lake 3 hours away. Like, how do you, even as someone who's investigated these, like ever make sense of it? As it's just so shocking every time.
It's not just cutting up a body; it's cutting up your husband or your brother.
Yeah.
It's hard to wrap your head around that as a regular person like we are. We're regular people, right? It's hard to wrap your head around that, regardless of what happens. And again, here's one thing I can't stress enough: we have no idea what's going on in somebody else's house. If you're not in there, if you're not part of it, we have no idea what's going on. I mean, I know my neighbors pretty well. I have no idea what's going on in their house. There could be all kind of things going on. So who knows what happened that brought him to that point, and who knows what caused this guy's death. I think we're going to see in the pretty near future, and I anticipate the charges will be upped.
Yeah, I'd be surprised if they weren't. And then just lastly, it's just, one thing I noticed, I don't think like a local media outlet's going to talk about it, but you do see Dalewayne Turner's Facebook profile picture change after 2 days after his arm is found in this lake. As an investigator, do you make anything of that? I mean, we could presume he was no longer alive, no longer alive at the time
Correct.
that happened. I guess, what do you make of that if you're someone who's on this case?
So again, this is going to be a feeble attempt by the people who are responsible to say, "Oh, well, no, wait a minute, he's just missing. Look, he's updated. He's obviously somewhere updating his Facebook page. The discovery of the limbs is probably not something they expected to happen, but it's just somebody trying to cover their tracks, trying to send law enforcement down a different path."
And you just think too, I mean, anything time you do on Facebook, everybody knows exactly where, I mean, the amount of data that they have and tracking you, which is a whole other conversation. But, the idea that perhaps law enforcement wouldn't know where he updated or where the profile was updated from, who would have access to it beyond him. Interested to see if that comes into play of this. Just a sad case. I mean, they're all sad cases, but, think of this one, we'll figure, learn more of what police believe happened here. But certainly sad when you look at the pictures of a happy couple. And then, for this man to lose his life like this, it's just incredibly tragic. Will Svilar, retired detective commander with the Chicago Police Department, one of our common guests here on the case. And I know you have your own show that people can find here on YouTube. What do people need to know about it?
Big City Crime Inside the Red Tape. There's me and two homicide detectives I worked with for, over 10 years. And we have an FBI agent, Maureen O'Connell, who's brilliant. She's 25 years with the FBI in evidence recovery. Danny Stover, Tim Murphy. We worked together for a lot of years. We're just trying to get people perspective of, I mean, there's a lot of people out there talking about cases. We're trying to get the perspective of what we see from inside the red tape. And what we mean by that is crime scene tape is out there. Most people are outside the crime scene tape. We've been inside it. And, if you want to see what we're all about, we're going live today at 6 p.m. Central. Give us a look, see if you like it.
Yeah, it's a great show. Really interesting perspectives there. Thanks as always, Will Svilar, for being here on the case. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Chris.
That will do it for On the Case, presented by Law&Crime. Subscribe to us on YouTube and Spotify, and we are also streaming on Peacock. I'm Chris Stewart. We'll see you next time.